we do a small paper for Rutgers, and you know, maybe my opinion will change one day, but not, I don't think. As it stands now, in a news piece, I would never have the right to curse. I mean, I don't think it would have a place there. However, we do have an opinion section and also an arts and entertainment section. And some people have given me kind of a weird look when people write things that have expletives in them, and I'm fine with that. And we publish that. That's print paper that's around the campus. We've never really gotten complaints about it. I think it's sort of understood that in the opinions and arts section, it's their voice. I'll be honest, even though it is their voice, sometimes it does detract from what they're trying to say, because it's sort of like you're putting easy emotion into words. I don't know. But that's print. Online, yeah, I'd say that's a little different, just because there are definitely tons of people, I mean, I wouldn't say like bigger, like news conglomerates or whatever, but like people who do publish, when they talk about the news, they probably talk about, you know, other stuff as well, but who do just sort of throw that in there, and they are getting their message across, but and you can also throw that into the character limit where, you know, those words that you're saying that don't really mean anything are taking up space that could be spent reporting on something. I don't have a moral issue with it. It's simply, there's a time and a place. Some people find the right time and place, other times it's just inappropriate.
I don't see curse words entering into traditional news narrative anytime soon. I think journalists are kind of obsessed with the style and the language that they use and how that is, and being consistent throughout different areas of their publication. I mean, I'll get yelled at if I use an Oxford comma somewhere in the middle of an article, and that's just like not okay. So I can't really see putting the F word in a news piece at any point. But I do think that there's a place for some vulgar language in new media form if it adds a certain color or it's in a context that will help engage people. But then also it's important to be careful about not offending and alienating people, but rather sort of to use those words to spark interest or engagement. And if it's possible to predict that one. So there's actually, one of the case studies is about protesting censorship in China, and although I didn't include any clips from the actual vulgar language, there's this really cute, I guess, character in China called a grass mud horse. Has anyone heard of it? Okay. Well, it's this like very, I don't know if it's coming. Yeah, it's this very like cute kind of llama-like horse with lots of fur, and they sing in a very high-pitched voice in Chinese, and they're talking about, you know, prancing through the forest. But because Chinese is a language where certain words very closely resemble other words, it's actually possible that they're actually saying these really vulgar curses, followed by protesting the Chinese government's policy of censorship. And, you know, they defeated the river crabs, which is actually censorship in Chinese, because they're essentially the same words, in order to protect their grassland, free speech. And yeah, you can watch this really funny video actually. And now they've disappeared from the desert forever. So I think if you're, and the rest of the song is extremely vulgar if you take it to the literal vulgar meaning as opposed to talking about, you know, little llamas prancing around in a field. So I think that definitely has a place, and that helps challenge an institution and an established way of thinking that was wrong in the first place. So if you're using it to kind of poke fun at something and at some establishment, I think that it's valuable.
Other questions? I think we say the thing is everyone a publisher, but actually, while we may agree that everyone should be a publisher, the problem is that no one is an editor. everyone is a publisher, but no one is an editor. Like when you talk about maybe inserting some vulgar languages in posting Facebook and all that, you know, that's really cool. And I think it's also related to what Carol was talking about earlier about somehow no one monitoring, like,
Again, I guess I have a hard time completely buying that. I think there are many people, I think there are many young people who are engaged. I think it may not be in the way we're expected to be engaged, but I think we are. I think people are reading things and they're volunteering in different places. I think people are watching things and it's sparking an interest for them to go create whatever movements they want to create, you know. I think they're engaged. I think they're also, I'm sure there's like many people who aren't engaged, but I think that spans across, you know, across ages, across generations. I don't know how fair it is to say that, you know, young people are less and less interested in this stuff. I think they're skeptical of a lot of things. I think they're skeptical of a lot of established news sources, but I think they're also skeptical of established government systems. But I think, again, that's across the board. I wouldn't say that that's specific to people our age. But I guess that could be the case. I just don't buy it. Also just thinking within my group of people I've been educated with and people I've grown up with and so on, and they're all people who are very involved in various capacities. So that's my contribution on that one.
Well, I guess it's sort of a matter of, well, I mean, first of all, I would be generalizing and say all millennials, but I think surely some millennials, and maybe even a slightly larger portion than other populations, are less interested in it simply because I guess most news pieces or whatever it is about governance aren't really presented in the way that people would find interesting, which is sort of a, I'm not saying that, oh yeah, if it's not interesting, they shouldn't read it, no, they should. But I think that it's much harder to gain an audience, and especially just going back to the new media, online sources. There's a million things written in interesting ways, you know, and I think some people don't realize that there's sort of like an association between interesting and important online. So if they see an article, I'm saying they, I mean, I don't know what I'm talking about, millennials, they see an article online that's interesting to their life personally, they're like, okay, this is very important. You see something talking about politics, which in reality could and most likely does have a larger impact on their life than whatever that interesting article was. It's not immediately gratifying in that sense. So it might, if there is any difference with millennials, I think it might be in the presentation of these news sources. But I mean, I don't think I'd even scratch the surface because that's, if we knew why people weren't voting, why they weren't paying attention, I think we would have tried to fix it by now, but it's sort of, it's beyond me.
Dr. Crow, do you want me to speak more to if they care about newspapers or if they care about voting?
Both.
Okay.
And actually, in relation, there's a publication you had in Community Journalism Review about some of these issues, maybe that young people are consuming their news from different sources and all that. If you can also tell it on, it's good. Okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna both agree with you and disagree. We sort of have an ongoing difference of opinion on this one. I do think, I would agree that I think millennials are engaged in news. I think that there's just such a mass and such a high volume of news that's available. It's hard to pick what you can really be in the know about. But I think that it's socially cooler to know about current events than it is to just sort of have a blasé attitude about it, and that the more we talk about them, the greater interest is generated among young people, millennials and Generation Z, I guess they're called, in learning more and finding out more. So I think that there is that level of engagement. It's just that what might be important to them might not be important to other people. So maybe somebody knows a lot about Latino rights or police brutality in the Northeast, but doesn't know a lot about what's going on in Egypt. Or it's just, and then maybe if they hear more about Egypt later in the week, they'll investigate and become educated. I do think that there's a great deal of apathy and frustration with the current political system and sort of the blockade that's going on in Congress and the sort of party politics and ridiculous amounts of money being spent on every election and all the contention with our two-party system right now, and that's generating sort of this attitude that maybe we just shouldn't vote because we're buying into a political game that doesn't really benefit citizens. And I think that's a problem that the United States has to address going forward. I'm not sure I have a lot of confidence that it will be addressed. So I would say that there is that level of apathy and engagement on the political level, but not necessarily in terms of media or being informed.
I want to go to a follow, but on the way, two things. At one point, this generation has some responsibility too. When it comes to like that video, 2012, it was like 30 minutes long, and it was an issue that say this generation didn't really know about, but they watched it because it was engaging. And I find that in the students here in our undergrad program, as well as actually in other majors throughout campus, students are very engaged, but the things that sometimes they're engaged about aren't in the curriculum. So I'm having students interested in Syrian refugees, autism issues, all sorts of things, but it's not. So in a way, it's like part of the issue is if we live too much in the box ourselves, and our generation.
At the beginning, these two countries have a lot of things in common, and some of them have direct relevance to what we're doing in the issue of media and democratic governance. So the two countries are already challenged currently. The other one has economic crisis, the other one has other crises, including information politics. So we want to look at them, and I'd like to invite George again to do the necessary. George, thank you.
Thank you, Uchenna. We are pleased to welcome here the ambassador and alternate deputy permanent representative of the Republic of Somalia to the United Nations, Ambassador Awale Kulane. Ambassador Kulane is the current alternate ambassador and representative at the permanent mission of the Federal Republic of Somalia to the United Nations, a key diplomatic post in this position. The permanent mission has enhanced good diplomatic relations between Somalia and the UN since its acceptance as a UN member many years ago. He has facilitated the work of the permanent mission, especially during the political crisis that engulfed his country for several years. He had previously served as chargé d'affaires, that is the second in command, and minister counselor at the Embassy of Somalia in Washington, D.C. As a diplomat, he served in that position for almost 1.5 years, from October 2013 to February of this year. Among his main duties, he was senior advisor to the chief of the mission, the Somali ambassador to the United States, and took responsibility for the day-to-day management of that embassy. He was also central in overseeing the various heads of sections of the diplomatic mission, such as the political, social, management, public affairs, and economic sectors. Prior to his service in New York and at the embassy in Washington, he was chargé d'affaires and deputy head of mission, or as we call it in the State Department in the U.S., DCM, deputy chief of mission, at the Embassy of the Republic of Somalia in Beijing, the People's Republic of China. There, Ambassador Kulane gave long service of about 4 years from December of 2009 to September 2013. He was the acting chief of mission, or chargé d'affaires, from June 2010 to January 2012. Among his other contributions to that embassy include his advisory role to the chief of the mission, managerial roles regarding the post, and overseeing the major sections of the mission, both public, economic, and managerial. In 2009, before committing himself to a diplomatic career, he was Director General and Chief of Staff at the Office of the Prime Minister in Mogadishu, Somalia's capital, for 11 months under Prime Minister, His Excellency Omar Abdirashid Ali Sharmarke. Ambassador Kulana used his role to assist the Prime Minister in developing short-term and medium-term strategic plans for individual government ministries and for the totality of the Somali government. He was mandated with the responsibility of ensuring that the plans were both compatible and complementary. He was also supposed to ensure that the ministerial work plans were aligned with ministerial strategic plans and national strategic and work plans as well. Among others duties were included the development of strategies used for evaluating the implementation and success of programs and policies. Earlier in 2008, Ambassador Kulane served in the same office of the Prime Minister, where he was given an advisory role. He was the political advisor to former Prime Minister Nur Hassan Hussein. He performed this role for a period of 14 months, and his major areas included advising that Prime Minister on European Union affairs, youth affairs, reconciliation, and the Somali diaspora. Ambassador Kulane excelled at various educational institutions, which also honored him with various awards and certifications. The College of Northwest London honored him with a teaching certificate in education in 2002. The Kenya Institute of Administration, KIA, honored him with Senior Civil Servant certification in 2009. And in 2012, Cornell University in upstate New York honored him with an Executive Leadership Certificate. Other awards and certificates included the Somalia Diplomatic Training Program Certificate by the Department of International Relations and Cooperation in South Africa. I therefore give you Ambassador Awale Kulane of the Federal Republic of Somalia. If you wait just a moment, Mr. Ambassador, we'll have your map set up right behind you.
Lieutenant, should I shut the lights off or not? So I'll wait till he comes up.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, that's fine. Can you hear me? Thank you very much. I might develop a big head after that introduction. So apologies, but thank you. The topic and the discussion of the conference actually is important to us. As Dr. Akos stated that, when countries that are developing or countries in crisis, Greek and Somali, for example, are very different in many areas, but representation is an issue sometimes. So before I engage in the issue of how the world media covers Somalia, I wanted to start with a hypothetical. Imagine a reporter just arriving. Imagine that we're in the USA, but USA is a developing country, just an imagination. And imagine that the media outlet sends some reporter to do a single report about the USA. And that single report is about the incidents, the country that's happening in the USA. And this is a hypothetical situation. Imagine this reporter represents a global audience curious about the United States of America.
And then imagine, and then imagine that this reporter, this news report will be witnessed by potential investors for the USA, tourists, students, and others that the USA needs to influence. Also, for this hypothetical, let's assume that this is the only reporter that will appear in the global news weeks for the next weeks and months. And his report will matter, even though he came just to cover one incident issue, but this will reflect the image of the USA for the coming weeks or months. And let's also imagine that the report will appear in all major global newspapers, TV outlets, news agencies, and everything. So, and the reporter starts by saying, I'm in a nation where there is a constant shooting and violence demonstrations, race riots. Recently, in the United States, there has been a brutal police shooting in Texas and Illinois, as well as violent shooting of 2 Virginia reporters killed on air just a few weeks back, and a month ago, members of the USA military were targeted in Tennessee. Moviegoers were killed in Louisiana, movie theater, and of course in June, 9 people were killed in a mass shooting at the Emmanuel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And many of the US cities are seeing an increasing level of violence. And then this is covered by a reporter who's just there for a few hours, or maybe a couple of days, and assume that he's just wearing a khaki vest and a bulletproof vest while he's making this report, and the photos are circulated in that scenario. Of course, no American would refute the reality of the stories in general, but no American or informed non-American would allow such incidents to define the United States. Because America is more than such individual specific incidents. Countries like the US are and must be defined by many other factors, including its innovation, advances, hospitality, art, diversity, culture, history, and so on. So no nation will allow to be defined by a few incidents and challenges. However, narrow reporting by many global media outlets about Somalia have branded the nation by its challenges and obstacles alone. As a result, it falls to the Somali people and its government to challenge the validity of such reporting and demonstrate that such reports should not be interpreted as the truth. Our knowledge about the world is mainly informed by what we learn through the media, but just how objective and informed are the journalists who inform our knowledge and perception of the world? Could we be just subjected to a biased, misinformed reporting? While news networks play a major role in shaping our views of the world, their coverage of international news is wanting. News networks have significantly reduced their foreign bureaus, especially in the developing world, since it's cheaper and improves rating to cover local news. Only a small percentage of news coverage is dedicated to international news. Only news sites and online news sites are no better in this coverage of world news. The same news covered by news networks is replicated online news sites, local media, even CNN mainly recycles international news from Reuters and AP wires. The change in the economic structure of the news industry in an age of cost saving and budget cuts has led to perception of investing in an international news as a costly and risky strategy. And Western media are the most affected by this problem and have seen significant decline in international correspondence. The decline of foreign reporting has not only been witnessed in television reporting, but also in print media. The circulation of print newspaper has declined due to the rise of free, mostly online publications. Unfortunately, free publications offer less news and mainly rely on non-original reporting and worse blogging as opposed to paid newspaper. It is thus hard to verify the authenticity of news being reported. Erroneous reporting by one news network regularly translates into misinformation and perception by the wide audience. The narrow reporting of international news has led to a stereotyping approach to foreign affairs. Today, news networks are less interested in reporting actual facts about international affairs. On the contrary, they tend to dwell more on the past perceptions and a nation of foreign countries that are seen to be exciting to them. Draw attention to news report and improve rating as a reported by Dr. Gerardimus, the narrow reportage of foreign news by the international media has led to a significant decline of new factual reporting from the developing world. Somalia is arguably one of the world's worst victims of such a biased and misinformation reporting about the developing world. A simple research of Somalia on Google News reveals more negative aspects of the country than positive ones. Like other nations around the world, Somalia has its problem. Like other nations, Somalia does not claim perfection, but again, it is unfair to define a country by only its challenges and problems. Somalia has for a long time been considered the most failed state in the world. This has been for a good reason. Since the Somali government collapsed in 1991, the country became a byword for chaos. The once vibrant Mogadishu, the country's capital city by the seaside, became home to civil war, followed by Al-Shabaab and Islamic terror groups. What remained of the city were houses and shops poked by bullet holes, burned-out facades of a building in 2 decades civil war and anarchy ensued in the country. But this is still in the past. Somalia has made important strides in the recovery process, none of which has been reported by the media outlets. Terror still exists as a major challenge in the country, but the resilience and fighting spirit of Somalis and its people has ensured that the progress is still made amidst these challenges. A historic achievement in Somalia was the coming to power of permanent federal government in 2012. After 2 decades of lawlessness, the country's capital is no longer controlled by Islamic militia group. Al-Shabaab is no longer a standing army and not an existential threat to Somalia. While although terror attacks focused on public hotels and soft targets still occur, the power of the militia groups has been reduced significantly. In fact, the country is gearing up for a democratic process to facilitate democratic elections, and the federal government has regained direct control over 80% of the country. I'm sure you haven't heard this from the MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News. During the keynote speech from President Hassan Sheikh in the high-level partnership forum in 2012, he said he recognized that 2012 as the year that marked the start of a period of pursuing stability and peace and prosperity for all Somalis. The era of Al-Shabaab and militia group dominance that had crippled the social and economic progress of Somalia had been brought to an end. At some point, the path of unification was unclear, and Somalia appeared as though it had been doomed to fail. In 2 years following the establishment of federal government, a foundation for stabilization and ensuring reform had been built in the country. The New Deal Somali Compact that was endorsed in Brussels in 2013 had guided the process. Somalia stood a new lead. As early as 2013, Somalis who had fled the country to live in other lands were returning in large numbers, contrary to the popular reporting of the global media of Somalia as the most dangerous and inhabitable place in the world. Somalia now offers hope. Visit Somalia and you will change your outlook of the country. Today, we have a daily international flights to Istanbul, Dubai, Nairobi, Djibouti, and numerous private-run charter flights with the country. Somalia's global diaspora is now returning to the country despite having been settled in foreign lands for over decades. Now they are coming back to their homeland to share their expertise in rebuilding the nation. A good example worth mentioning is Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube accounts established by some diaspora youth that focus on visible changes in the country and share with their peers. However, this doesn't reach the international media. Today, Somalia presents lots of opportunities to the those returning from abroad and even foreigners. Immediately after the new federal government was formed, Mogadishu was declared open for business. The year that the country has been governed by Al-Shabaab and other militia groups led to a non-existent education system and poorly developed infrastructure. Those who have been abroad are presented with numerous opportunities to apply their expertise in developing business, governance, healthcare, and other issues. The return of the diaspora has also translated to a relaunch of Mogadishu's construction. The shops that have for a long time been shelled out facades are now functioning businesses. There is hope that the country will regain its economic political stability. As a country, we have made noteworthy strides building a regional administration. Our success has largely been enabled by the determination of the people of Somalia and sacrifice daily made by the Somali forces within the help of the African Union mission, AMISOM, the international community and the United Nations, which have been instrumental in this progress. And the United States, of course, whose government and people have sacrificed much for the Somali people. We acknowledge that as a country, Somalia is faced with some challenges and problems. Prior to 2012, Somalia was a country dominated by terror groups and militia. While our problems may appear direr than those of other countries, we have done part to address them since the establishment of the federal government. We are working very hard to realize to revive Somalia as a peaceful country as it used to be decades ago, and we are getting there. The strides that have been made in collaboration with our regional and international partners have set groundwork for achieving progress and stability. This should hit the headlines, and it never appears so. To continue the right path of attaining positive outcomes, we understand that contribution of the international community is paramount. The development of the country will require investment from foreigners, multinational corporations. Further, Somalia must recognize as the new business hub of East Africa and need to expand our business territory far and wide. Unfortunately, our efforts cannot bear fruit if our targeted audience is constantly bombarded with misinformation about who we are as a country. How the global media covers Somalia will play a key role in determining Somalia's future. While it would be unfair to ask the media to restrain reporting about the problems and challenges facing our country, it is equally fair to expect that they pay equal attention to the progress that has made as a nation. Amidst all the challenges lie hope, resilience, and the promise of a better Somalia. How people perceive Somalia will largely depend on what the media reports. Reporting only the challenges and problems only frustrates the efforts made by the Somali government and its people. That way you will have aided the triumph of the Al-Shabaab and other militia groups who have just been, we're fighting against. Ethical conduct must be observed in the reporting, as the media forms a major tool for shaping public opinion. In the case of Somalia, the picture that the media paints of the country will determine its success in reintegrating itself into the international community. Besides this, the involvement of foreigners in restoring peace and stability will depend on their perception of the country. The stability of the country's livelihood of its residents depends on the perception of the global audience has of the country. Somalia is inhabited by around 10 million people, many of whom still live in difficult conditions. About 3.2 million require humanitarian assistance due to also drought repeatedly occurring in the Horn of Africa. A high number of the population reside in rural areas, do not have access to basic amenities such as electricity and clean water. The education system and infrastructure developing in the country is recovering, but ever more gradually. These people already have their fair share of problems. Giving distorted information about the country will only serve make them lose hope in the slow but progressive changes taking place. As we do our part to advance peace and develop in Somalia, we count on the international community support and assistance. We will continue to ensure that we do our part to do everything necessary to make the transition from failed state to functional state to a full integrated member of the community of peaceful nations, and we will count on your support in achieving a better living for people of Somalia and the generations to come. I can guarantee you that we shall not quit fighting for what we believe in. The negative effects of war and instability is not lost on us. We shall strengthen our foundation and create a positive future by eliminating the negative aspects of our community. The media is crucial and critical member. We expect that the media to become a part of the agent of change for peace in post-conflict settings. Through reporting the progress we have made, the challenges we have overcome, rather than what we used to be as a nation. Finally, we work on creating such a platform where governance and media work is promoted to deliver peace. Thank you.
I was wondering whether there are some comments or observations that anyone would like to make. Yes. Sure.
Ambassador, thank you very much for the good news coming from Somalia. The question I have is around economic development. My studies of Africa for the last 20 years are the lack of infrastructure holding back all the economies. I was in Ethiopia with my wife last year, and you can see progress in Ethiopia, roads, metro rail, other developments. Now we have a dam, Renaissance Dam in 2 years to be completed. With the development of the BRICS, which includes South Africa, and the effort that China is investing in Africa and around the world through the Silk Road Fund, do you see this as an opportunity now for investment in infrastructure in Africa? The West has not been involved in this for decades, but there seems to be a new potential. And I want to know your thoughts about Africa realizing this with integration, Northwest Railroad, North-South Railroad, East-West Railroad, and Africa uses new opportunities to fully bring its economies up to a higher level. And particularly, this is what Somalia needs in terms of power, roads, development, support, et cetera.
Thanks. I think that's an essential question. First, Somalia has the longest coast in Africa now. South Africa used to claim this, but we measured it in. Now it's Somalia's. But still, there's no use of having a long coast without, utilizing it. Not only to the neighboring countries, but all the way to the Central African countries where the landlocked countries can have access to it. So I think the opportunity of infrastructure there is necessary. Also, it helps us where Ethiopia and Kenya have improved their infrastructure during the time that means that linking up with them is not. Somalia is, as you can see the map, if I stand up, I'll just show you. Somalia is now, we're forming regional federal states as we speak today. So we have a state here called Galmudug State. Puntland already existed. Somaliland, already existed there. And each state has a unique aspect. They all have access to Ethiopia and the sea. So again, this creates an opportunity where infrastructure is encouraged within the country. Well, I must say that, and I forgot to mention this, when I mentioned that the conflict has been branded to Somalia, it's not only branded to Somalia, it's been branded to Africa. The last 20 years, if you watch the news, you'll see either humanitarian crisis, piracy, and so on. I worked in China. The word pirate for China is Haidao. So you mention somebody, you say, oh, I'm from Somalia, they say Haidao. It's already associated with it. It's like calling you a pirate automatically. So again, and you wonder, they didn't just get this. This was carried through the Middle East, something that's been reported. So how could we get infrastructure from China if the public's perception of Somalia was being pirates? And this image of Somalia didn't only hurt Somalia, as I was saying, but it became an image that was captured by the entire African countries were subjected to this. Most of them were progressing, most of them were doing a lot better than that. In fact, Somalia is being pulled out now by this problem with the support of the African troops. I mentioned AMISOM, about 1,000 soldiers died helping Somalia from Burundi and Uganda, working with us to fight against extremists. And we're doing a lot better than countries that it's been invested on. We're doing a lot better than Iraq and Afghanistan, where issues like this have been, with a lot less expenses. So I think what I mentioned is the challenges and opportunities, go hand in hand. So we're lucky that we're coming about a time where the discussion of Africa's growth, infrastructure, development, and network, and the regional countries are working together. Of course, capacity is a big question. Do we have the capacity not only to absorb, but to maintain and establish systems that work with the regional areas and reduce costs and so on. But infrastructure for us is essential. We're looking, our national interest is what defines us, and we find anyone who can support us in these areas. But we want to link up with Africa, which is already linking up in general. And of course, having a big nation like Ethiopia and Djibouti, which already has about 7 ports in place, all distributing to all the way to Central Africa, this defines an opportunity that we hope to apply. Sorry if I went into each other.
Okay, you got it.
Anybody got a mic? Okay, I'll have to bellow from here. I have several questions, if I may.
Yeah.
First, Mr. Messer, can you give us a rough idea of what small area of the country, in what small area of the country Al-Shabaab still operates, so that you can show where they have been pushed to? Second two-part question.
Yeah.
As you know, there's been a lot of talk of building railways in Africa. As you know, the Kenyans are rebuilding completely the line that goes from Mombasa, Nairobi, Kampala, and they're building it in standard gauge now. It was a narrow gauge railway. And they're extending it around Lake Victoria, eventually to Kigali and Bujumbura. Any thought of building any railways in your country? And if you've got miles, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles, or many more kilometers of beaches, any talk of any tourism development? And what do you think you can do? Do you have any naval capacity in order to at least attempt to take care of this piracy problem off your coast? I'm sure it's less than it was, but I'm sure the problem has not disappeared.
I'll start with the last question then. The piracy has reduced now, but piracy doesn't require a navy. Piracy starts from the land. These criminal groups got support because there was vulnerability, there was opportunities that they could take advantage of. Young people were not educated that they could exploit. So if we work on providing institutions within the country, then the reduction of piracy, of course, will reduce. And we Somalis argue that piracy, you cannot fight piracy with navies in the sea alone. It's not a force coming from somewhere you don't know. It's identified, and again, we've been saying that most of the cost should be spent in mobilizing the institutions in there and reinforcing the system and the governance and providing opportunities. So that is, but piracy has now almost disappeared. So again, if we're going to have a navy, it will not be because of fighting piracy. It's just to serve other responsibilities as well. But coming back to the other question, which was the Kenya and the income, that is the East African community, I think, is doing those projects. We have made our application to be part of the East African community, and they're still considering it. So possibly we will have the opportunities of linking up not only with infrastructure, but taking advantage of the people-to-people communications and opportunities that could come out from that. So we'll see how that develops. But even though we're not part of the East African community, it doesn't stop us from reaching out to our neighbors with opportunities that Somalia can provide. And we hope that the big coast of Somalia facilitates for all of Africa that are landlocked and can have access to and reach. And we hope to put ourselves in that position where Somalia can be a gate to Africa. And this is what we hope to aspire to in general. And the first question was Al-Shabaab, yes. First of all, with the media, there's another problem we have. The areas that we previously claimed that Al-Shabaab controlled, when you see the media maps, doesn't mean that Al-Shabaab provides services or provide work. It means that the government hasn't reached those areas yet. And I'll give you a simple example. Somalia has been in civil war for a couple of decades. The government infrastructures are weak, and it's the government to capture, for example, to run a city from Al-Shabaab required to establish a court, a police station, a school, a well, and services, basic services. So all these require cost. But when Al-Shabaab control a city, they don't need to do that. They just need the same city that the government is spending all this money on. Al-Shabaab would only need to have 15 young people with 4 different cars roaming around and scaring them. And doing, basically they will manage by providing fear. So again, where sometimes people are associated with where the Al-Shabaab are is where the government could not reach, not because of security, but because of resource, because of infrastructure, because of capacity. So Somali forces, and it's amazing. This is one of the stories that are not told. The young Somali forces who are, fighting to defend against Al-Shabaab today are the ages less than 30, 20 to 30 years old, the soldiers. They haven't had the opportunity I had. For example, I was in Somalia before the civil war. I took advantage of a free education, free health that the country and the nation offered, and I feel Somalia has really invested in me. But these young people didn't have those opportunities. The war, some of them started while they were 5, 3, or 7 years old. But they are in the forefront today, defending the institutions that we want to revive. Because they only didn't heard of this, but they want to change the situation from what it was. And they're taking enormous risks. Nobody reports this, but what happens is I was in, Somalia for the last 6 years, and when I was working for the Prime Minister, the area that the government controlled was very limited. But the stories you hear were amazing, that a young person will be shot from a place by Al-Shabaab, will try to create fear and chase out one. Another one will stand in his place to defend an institution and a government that cannot even pay his wages. But he would do that so that the situation differs from this. He will do that because he wants things to be better. He will do that because he wants Somalia to move on from the situation of not being a civil war. And that is what have the opportunities that we're talking about in every age of the country being played out now has been reached out because of the blood of those young people who have invested their lives in it. And it's, all kind of Somalis have really tried to put some changes in that. So the Al-Shabaab controlled areas are sometimes areas where there are no government institutions in place. So if I look at the map now, I'll just show you. 5, 6 years ago, there was, Mogadishu is here. There was only a Mogadishu small dot there that the government controlled, the federal government controlled. Most of these areas were controlled by Al-Shabaab, Kundal was controlled by autonomous state, which was part of the government. And northern Somalia, again, another missed opportunity there. It was for a while the most peaceful areas in East Africa, and we still visit there. So the Al-Shabaab corridor now that you'll probably hear about is in these areas. And that is, they've been pushed away from Kismayo, and from the port, and they've been pushed away from all the way here. And this is a small corridor, and they are there because the infrastructure, even AMISOM, there's an infrastructure limitation for any force to find the ability to not only capture these areas, but manage and provide services and so on, and link up. And this small area is where they have been left into, so they don't control any more big cities, they don't control any more ports, they're fading away. But we have other enormous challenges, coming back from civil war. And just looking at, for example, the media. We have a free press in place, but we don't have trained journalists in Somalia. Not, established trained journalists in Somalia. The young people in Somalia who've been journalists, and this is my perspective, and I want to share this with you, is they've been very well knownly reporting from warlords, but they don't know how to report about an institution. They don't know how to evaluate a parliament. We have taken a new system. Somalia now is the federal government of Somalia. We don't know what federal is yet. We're still defining our residual powers. We're still in that discussion. But do we have the media capacity to absorb this, to educate the people? And I'm talking about the local media now. Do we have the capacity for the media community or the young journalists in Somalia to kind of evaluate and compare and contrast with other nations? So if the media is not informed again, you have a public that will be confused of what's being said. So our challenge is now not having, we're different from other African countries in a way. It's not lack of freedom. You can go to Mogadishu and say whatever you want, and the limitations, of course there will be some, is because of capacity. Again, we have poor capacity with our judicial system. There haven't been a court case in Somalia for the last 20 years. And the last judge, and again, to be a judge in Somalia about 25 years ago, there was a rule that all judges had to be from the age of 40 and over. So the most experienced judge you have would be now 80 years old, that is alive. So again, if something happens, we don't have, for example, the discourse that is required in the community. And this discourse should be carried out by a certain media. And I'm saying it's improving, but we have challenges beyond Al-Shabaab. So having free to manage your country is not enough. We still have an uphill struggle, providing 70% of Somali is youth. They're under the age of 30 years old. And when you have, and this is a time bomb. If they don't have opportunities, they don't have a fair share of what's happening in the country. They don't have a say. They can't see themselves in cross-sectionally on what's happening. If hope is not there, as we briefly discussed before, if they don't see, it's not providing security, but it's providing opportunities for them in a place where they could say they have a role in it. And that requires organizing. All that requires more than endowment. It requires an infrastructure of people. But it doesn't help when the only reporting you hear from the example I was giving you is something that occurs to us in Somalia for a long time. A lot of things happen, but a media reporter will come down one afternoon from Nairobi, again with a helicopter, and will just take pictures, explain how Somalia, he's being in Somalia alone for him is, like appearing in a movie of Mad Max or something like that. And that is compounded. And as an individual who, worked for Somalia outside and lived as a diaspora, every Somalian, every African, and I believe this, is always explaining, is always defining, or adding something to what the media says. And it's not only Somalia. Sometimes the perception that has been given away from Africa is what we Somalis are complaining about. Imagine, every given time there's always been 4 countries at war in Africa. But the only reports that you get from Africa is either civil war, humanitarian crisis, and so on. So there's a lot of loss here, and I think that is sometimes the frustration that we feel. We're not saying you should not be reported. You should report what happened, and it should be factually represented. But then again, you should have other situations. For example, everything I've said about the USA didn't stop there. It started off from, after the news, they will tell you what Obama said about these attacks, what Attorney General has made these comments about. So people have a bigger meaning of incidents, but in Somalia we not provide that opportunity. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. As a matter of fact, you've said so much, and it's also very informative for us, even at CMPI, because I'm able to identify some needs those who have, especially for media training. Part of the story is that, well, it's common. Most African countries, yes, they are misrepresented in the media. We know that. And Somalia, of course, like you also said, do have a lot of issues. But the question I have is, I'm not sure the United States, for example, will forget so quickly, the Black Hawk incident. So most of the stories about Somalia, people always think about that. But then, with the reconstruction or post-reconstruction era in Somalia, I'm wondering whether there is a specific plan to change the narrative. Because the truth is that you don't want people to tell a story. So you need to tell your own story. So otherwise, if you are defined, you live by how you are defined. So to what extent, is there any plan by a government to define Somalia in a more positive direction? If there is no plan, are there, or do you believe that such a thing could ever happen? Why I'm saying this is a common thing. Actually, in 2013, I had the privilege of addressing the Pan-African Parliament on this same topic about changing Africa's narrative within the international media. So it was well received, but the thing is, the way news operates is such that if there are negative things happening, yes, we'll talk about that. But then there are good things that are happening. It's Africa and its people that are supposed to really project those good things that are happening. I can assure you that a lot of people here have been able to benefit from some of your information. I mean, it's not information provided. A lot of Americans, of course, don't care so much about what's going on out of the America. So, but you need to really provide this forum to be able to explain some of these issues, And like you talked about capacity building especially within the media sector. I didn't know that it was that bad. Actually, we were even planning a program in Kenya for East Africa. But it looks like from what you're saying, it might be useful really to think about focusing on Somalia to see to what extent we can help provide some training for emerging reporters or budding reporters in that place, especially with the change of structure of government that is taking place, for them to really know how to go about this and how to even project the image of Somalia. So it's all a lot of questions and comments, but for the interest of time, I think you wanted to say something.
I actually comment, this might help answer some sort of your questions. I'm an intern for the commission. And so the ambassador mentioned capacity as being a hindrance to the government, and they're working on building that capacity. One way that the diaspora has kind of taken on this role with the tools that we have, if you want to look at social media, for example, we did have a Twitter last week. There was an incident of a book fair that was going on for Somalis. And there was a reporter, Mary, I believe the hashtag was, someone tell Mary, Mary Keller, or Mary Helen, and I'll give you those details. But basically what it was she was a journalist, was reporting for Africa Network, and she was reporting a story on the book fair, and she used a photograph of a bombing. So if you look at the hashtag, you can put it out yourself on Twitter. And those who had Twitter within the Somali community took to that and hashtag that, someone tell Mary Keller, and that's where you can kind of assess what's in conversation that's going on amongst us. And they kind of took the tools that we've had so far while the government's still working on capacity build on the questions that you're asking. But that's going on, that discussion and conversation is going on. So I'll give you guys a hashtag to look at that if you want to see really outside of this room, because I know we're limited here, but just to see what's going on with Somalis abroad, and I mean from all over, coming from Australia, someone in Mogadishu, someone in the Netherlands, someone in Toronto. I tweeted on that hashtag, so we can kind of get that resonant there. I just wanted to offer the thought that for you guys.
I will allow the ambassador to wrap up so that we can have time to start the other session, which is also interesting.
Thank you. I think you touched on that point, but with regards to plan, every nation has a plan on what they want to do and how they want to achieve it. It's the rest of the media, or to scrutinize this. And I think one responsibility from the media is that it's not only responsibility but to reflect what's happening. But I will tell you a bit about what the Somali plan looks like in general. Basically, the political formation is now finished. After the state formations, we want to have an election, and that will allow the democratic process to continue. We are standing all our institutions at once, but there are challenges like the ones we've already mentioned. One other thing that you've not mentioned is not only the gap, the couple of decades Somalia was away from the globe as an institution, a lot has changed. For example, just to give an example, while I was chief of staff, I was working with a media expert, a media Somali communication spokesperson then, was the Somali government spokesperson at the same office about 40 years ago at that time. So he had an experience of 40 years doing this job. But he was totally against blogging, Twitters or anything like that. He didn't recognize these things as, and this is a debate I think within the media of how these new technologies have been, are adopted. But we're not only having this debate, but it's becoming an obstacle for us to utilize the skills that we have. So again, how do you bridge these gaps of technological differences? The real experts you have who have experience, who have used technology in every aspect of the institution, and the young ones who are coming in with new innovative ideas that could, give you a map of all the organizations and what they do with the graph and so on. So there are plans that, how that plans, I don't want to say that, of course, I believe our plans are great, but again, this is for the media to scrutinize and say, your plans are weak in this area, this is what should happen. But if your meaning is we have plans to come against the global media, or, I don't think we have the plan to spend millions of dollars on PR when we have people lacking basic amenities in the country. So again, priorities sometimes dictate that, what you really spend on just image alone, when we have other necessities around. But I think that's a decision for our cabinet, we have leaders and executive decisions who should decide on this. But we're really very much looking into how we proceed. And this is coming from, like now what my assistant stated, it's coming from the diaspora, because they see both worlds. They have informed us of, what the challenges are, what the perspectives are, what the assumptions that even they perceive from Somalia are. And I think, like you said, we share this with many African countries who are not even in conflict, but I don't want to say anymore. I think I've taken up more time from my colleagues who are coming in from Greece, but thank you for this opportunity, and I hope I've informed and helped you to have a perception of what's happening in Somalia. And again, I'll circulate my card, and any questions you have, please feel free to contact me, and thanks for your.
Thank you so much.
Now, that the media has really kept this in front of us since then. That the media has been our conscience, and the media has been the fact finder. That the media has really tried to get the story straight as to what happened, not only in terms of terrorism, but what happened to the first responders afterwards, which was a comparable tragedy, because hundreds of them had died from the neglect of our government, in effect, by letting them walk into that site without proper equipment, without proper protection. I think overall, the reason that we think it's important to support this organization and this conference, the responsible party in terms of trying to bring objectivity to the public forum, to the public discussion, to bring facts to the surface